On today's episode, I want to walk you through the process of dialing in an espresso. For most home baristas or people just getting into coffee, the process of dialing in espresso is the thing they struggle with the most. It's the thing that makes people cry when they're first trying to make good coffees at home. The process isn't that difficult once you know what you're doing, but it is something that you'll need to practice, and then it becomes kind of second nature. Before we get into the dialing in of the actual espresso, I think it's really important to understand what is an espresso. An espresso is a really strong coffee. To put it really simply, it's a 1-to-2 ratio, meaning that for every 1 gram of coffee, the extracted amount of wet coffee is 2 grams. So if you're using 18 grams in your portafilter, you should be getting 36 grams of extracted coffee. That's your espresso. So the idea of dialing in an espresso is basically, how do you get that 36 grams of coffee taste good? And one of the most important factors in making a really good tasting espresso is timing. It's the extraction time. It's how long does it take from us pressing the button to starting the extraction of the coffee to the coffee hitting 36 grams. And with espresso, usually the time frame of extraction is somewhere in the window of 20 to 25 seconds. So when we talk about dialing in the espresso, what we're talking about, how I can take my coffee, run it through the espresso machine so that the extraction time is in that window where coffee tastes good. And I should mention, coffee doesn't always taste good in that window. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It depends on the coffee. It depends on your tastes. But I'm gonna walk you through the process of getting to that good tasting coffee. And the most important factor in doing that is the grind size of the coffee. Think of it like this. If this was open at the bottom, which it's not, and you filled this with rocks and you poured water through, the water would pass through really quickly. That's like coarse coffee. If you packed this full of sand and you poured water through it, it would take a really long time for the water to pass through it. In fact, the sand would probably absorb a bunch of that water as well. That's fine coffee. So in theory, if your coffee is running through too fast, you need to make it finer to slow down the process of the water flowing through the coffee. If it's running too slow, you need to make your coffee a little bit coarser so that the water passes through the coffee a little bit faster. It's really simple when you think of it that way. It's a little bit harder in practice. So this is the espresso machine. I'm going to turn and not look at you, sorry. Okay, so the setup is we have the Baratza Secchi 270WI. I love this grinder for home use because it's got its own built-in scale. It weighs out the shot and it's got memory, so it's really great for that. And then the espresso machine we're using is the Fiamma Now Classica. Also a great home espresso machine. And I have not dialed this in at all, full disclosure. So I'm going to walk you through the process and hopefully I don't get it right on the first one because that would be a really boring video. Okay, so we're gonna grind to 18 grams. Okay, so we've got 18 grams. I'm going to make our shot. Take our cup. We're going to set this on the scale, and you do need a scale. If you don't have a scale, you won't know how much coffee is extracted. So this is important. I'm gonna tear out that scale. Run some water really quick just to keep it hot and clean it out. Put the portafilter in, scale under, cup under, and we're going to start now. Basically, I'm going to push the button as soon as coffee comes out, which is now. With this particular coffee, like 26 to 28 seconds is kind of the sweet spot. I can tell this is already gonna be fast because we're at 15 seconds, 20, 30 grams, and we stop it there. So that was 19 seconds, and I've got 37 grams. I don't wanna taste this. So what happens when you have a coffee that's extracted too fast is it comes out sour. It comes out thin and sour. And it's much easier to determine if a coffee came out too fast because it will like punch you like a wet turkey in the face. It's really, really sour usually, especially a natural like this Honduras will be. So you should taste your coffees, by the way. When you're dialing in, you should have a sip, see how it tastes. And yeah, that's really sour. It kind of tastes like crab apples, actually. Crab apples, it also tastes thin. It doesn't taste intense like it should. So That's too sour. That was 20 seconds. I kind of know this grinder, so I know where it's gonna work, but I don't want it to work right away. I wanna show you the process. So we're gonna go finer. The coffee went too fast. We need the water to take longer to get through the coffee. So we're going to go all the way to the other side. Let's go to B. And this is important. When you change your grind settings on your grinder, you should always grind 2 or 3 or 4 grams through before you do your full shot after, because sometimes there's retention of the grinds within the grinder. So we're gonna clear out like 4 or 5 grams now. Hopefully that's done the trick. Now we should also dump the old shot to the knockbox. Towel does not want to stay with us. Okay, and now we're going to grind again 18 grams, but we're much finer. If you're wondering, this is actually a weighted tamper, so it pops down when you're at the right weight. It's actually a really clever product. We're gonna do the same thing as before. We're gonna take our scale, we're gonna put the cup under it, we're gonna tear the scale, clear that out a little bit. We're gonna pop in the portafilter, the scale and the cup, and once again, we're going to start our shot, and as soon as we see coffee come out, we're gonna start the timer, which is now. So we're actually running pretty close to perfect here. That was 32 seconds. So that's a little bit longer than ideal. And again, we're gonna taste the coffee. When the coffee takes too long to go through, you end up with bitter coffee. You end up with over-extracted coffee, essentially. And honestly, bitter coffee is way harder to distinguish than sour coffee. Sour coffee, as I mentioned, slaps you in the face right away. Bitter coffee, you taste more in the aftertaste. It lingers a little bit. It's kind of like a bad aftertaste. So let's give this a taste. And actually, that's really close to perfect. That's really nice. I can usually tell bitter coffee because the first sip is kind of like a little bit boring. And then the flavors come out and then it kind of leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, which is probably where that saying comes from. So that's close, but I'd say it's probably 2 seconds off or 3 seconds off. Okay, so we're gonna now go more coarse because we want the water to pass through the coffee a little bit faster. So not much faster. I know this grinder pretty well, and I know that basically one spot on this is about 2 seconds. So we're gonna go basically a spot and a half over to the more coarse side. Dialing in your espresso becomes easier and easier the more you learn your equipment. Dump out the shot. Okay. Again, we're gonna grind like 5 grams. And now we're gonna grind our full 18 grams. And we're going to clear it, close it, pop in the portafilter, pop in the scale and the cup, go. Again, I'm gonna start the timer as soon as I see the first drip of water, which is now. I'm gonna talk about why I push the timer or start the timer when I see the coffee extracting in a second. But let's just watch this because it looks pretty close to perfect. We're at 29 seconds, or 25 seconds, and 36 grams, 27 seconds. So that's basically exactly where I want it to be. And here I'm looking for balance. I should mention, I taste the bitterness from the previous cup still in my mouth right now. That's not a good thing. Good coffee should have a nice aftertaste. And that's absolutely beautiful. It's really nice and well-rounded. I should mention that everybody has different tastes. So personally, I tend to prefer my coffee a little to the sour side, a little bit to the fruity side, whereas other people might like it a little bit more to the bitter side. That's why dialing in the espresso is up to you to decide where you want it to be and where you want it to taste. This is, for me, a really, really nice cup of coffee. I'm perfectly dialed in. And I should mention something. I choose to start the timer when the coffee first drips. A lot of baristas will start the timer as soon as they start the shot because they say that the extraction starts as soon as, you know, they've turned on the espresso machine. And I totally get that and I agree. But one method or the other doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's how it tastes and then replicating that taste. Those timings, that 27 or 28 seconds, that's like a benchmark. That's just a guiding point for you to aim towards. And then it's all about your taste buds and what you prefer and the taste you prefer at that point. So how you get to whatever you get to isn't important. The timing isn't important. It's all about your taste. It's all about making those 36 grams of coffee to the taste that you like and then being able to repeat that. So I hope this video helps you with dialing in the espresso. There are other methods to dialing in the espresso, but we're not going to get into them because we feel like the coarseness or fineness of your coffee's grind is the most important thing and probably the easiest thing to adjust. So we'll leave it there and we'll see you on the next video.